Growing up in the early 2000s, I was always a really big fan of history. I loved learning about historic events. I loved reading about historic figures. I loved reading about different time periods than my own. I always enjoyed delving into whatever history book I could get my hands on. So, also having a distinct affinity for video games, you can imagine how excited I was when I found Assassin's Creed. And while there are a lot of great entries in this series, I wanted to take time today to talk about one of my favorites, Assassin's Creed 2. The story of Assassin's Creed 2 starts off in present day, where you play as Desmond Miles, and this is where you directly pick up from the ending of the first Assassin's Creed. And while I think the first Assassin's Creed has a lot of merit and deserves a lot of credit for setting up the world that we engage in Assassin's Creed, I do think that the first entry in the series lacked in a lot of departments, particularly the gameplay section, where a lot of people at the time were complaining about how monotonous the gameplay flow could be, due to the similar style of missions that you do in Assassin's Creed, as well as the similar locations that you visit. So even though I did love the first Assassin's Creed, it did leave a lot to be desired in that department. And immediately upon loading up Assassin's Creed 2, I noticed, oh wait, this game is different. First off, I think the main setting for the game is perfect. 15th century Renaissance Italy was such an interesting time period in world history that I think it would take a supreme amount of disengagement for you not to want to learn about that period of history, especially in the context of a game as good as Assassin's Creed 2. You start off as Ezio Auditore, who is an ancestor of Desmond Miles. And at first, Ezio seems like your typical suave Italian protagonist. He seems extremely likable and charming, although he doesn't seem like he has that much depth to him. And honestly, when I first encountered him, he kind of came off as pretty shallow. And boy, how wrong I was. As you continue to play as Ezio, you start to see some real character depth in how he's written. He may come off as a rebellious teen at first who just wants to start fights and go sneak over his girlfriend's house, but it turns out he's also a pretty big family man. He genuinely loves helping his family out. Which is why in the beginning of the game, we go do odd jobs for different members of his family. Like we go visit Leonardo da Vinci with his mother, which I think is so funny how Ezio's mother was just casually friends with Leonardo da Vinci. We also go collect feathers for his brother Petruccio and beat up his sister Claudia's boyfriend who ends up cheating on her. And I gotta say, I really did enjoy these little slice of life moments that we get where we get more grounded character moments with Ezio and his immediate family, because it only gets more complicated from here. Soon enough, Ezio goes to do some work for his father, and he's supposed to deliver some letters across town for him to different people he knows. And he quickly catches wind that there's something more going on here than just these letters. There seems to be some kind of conspiracy that his father is engaged in. So Ezio returns home only to find his brothers and his father taken off to prison. Ezio tries to get them out of prison by delivering some documents to one of his father's trusted friends, only to find out that his father's friend is the one who put him there in the first place. He is a member of the group known as the Templars. And I thought this was a really interesting way to introduce the Templars in this game. How they broached the whole Assassin versus Templar conflict in this time period and contextualized it around Ezio and how it affected his family is super interesting to me. And it made me way more invested in the story overall. Because shortly after they're taken off to prison, Ezio's brothers and father are executed on false charges due to the Templar corruption that we saw earlier.
I'll kill you for what you've done!
And boom, there you have it. Classic revenge story. Ezio wants to get revenge on the people who murdered his family, and it turns out the Templars are just the guys that Ezio is looking for. So we spend the next 20-ish hours tracking down different members of the Templar Brotherhood and slowly assassinating them. But this isn't just a simple revenge story, this is also because the two groups, the Assassins and the Templars, are ideologically opposed. The Assassins seem to be a force that safeguards humanity from oppression and desires to keep it free from any sort of oppressive rule, while the Templars oppose that and seek to impose their will and order upon the entire world, which is a pretty simplified version of the conflict between the two, but nonetheless an accurate one. One thing that I remember loving about this game at the time was the way that the pacing was broken up by the different sections of the game. Like we get to go to Tuscany, we get to go to Florence, and we get to go to Venice even. And all three of these were pretty distinct locations, and all the locations in Assassin's Creed 2 were vastly more detailed and improved upon than its predecessor, Assassin's Creed 1. Rather than putting different Instagram filters over the entire city and hoping the player doesn't notice, now cities are actually laid out in a different way. And while this game did see the advent of the Collectathon Ubisoft style of gameplay, I think that it is tolerated here because it helps break up the more expository moments in the story so that the player doesn't feel like they're getting too much information at once and still feel like they're playing a game rather than reading a historical fiction fantasy novel. Once we get near the end of the story and Ezio seems to have slaughtered his way through the entire Templar Order in Italy, we defeat the Templar Grand Master, Rodrigo Borgia, and we enter this place called the Vault. No one knows what's inside of the vault except Ezio when he first steps inside of it. We're greeted with a sort of hologram of a goddess called Minerva, and this is where the game went from historical fiction to full-on sci-fi. Minerva explains she's a member of the first civilization, or the ones who came before. And the crazy thing here is she's not actually speaking to Ezio, she's speaking to Desmond across time. Which, when I was a kid, damn near made me pass out because I thought Minerva was talking through the TV. I mean, the way she just stared at the screen, it shook me. Minerva essentially says that the first civilization is the race of people who came before, so to speak, and they're the people who actually created the human race. Her message is also one of warning, as there was a disaster that caused the extinction of the first civilization, and Minerva is urging Desmond to safeguard humanity and to not let them repeat the first civilization's mistakes. And she tells him that in order to find the solution and save humanity, he has to go and find these other Piece of Eden temples and find these artifacts called the Apples of Eden. And then, before you know it, she's gone without a trace, and Ezio is one confused boy.
I have so many questions.
For me, this part was a great way to wrap up the story of the first game, and it seemed to merge the sci-fi genre and the historical fiction subgenre so eloquently at the time.
What the fuck?
And I don't think this story of Assassin's Creed 2 gets enough credit for how impactful it's been on gaming as a whole. Sure, everybody criticizes the later Assassin's Creed games for how monetized they are, for how formulaic they have become. And it's true, pretty much all of them can be boiled down to the formula that is seen in Assassin's Creed 2. But there's a reason for that. It's because it's a formula that worked so well for the time. And I unironically believe that the narrative of Assassin's Creed 2 is one of the best of the video games that came out during the PS3 360 generation. And it's not hard to see why this formula worked at the time. When you have great voice actors voicing all the characters, when you have a compelling protagonist, when you have an intriguing and mysterious narrative and gameplay that continues to engage the player, it's little wonder why Assassin's Creed 2 is still a favorite among fans of the series, including myself. I do want to take a more in-depth look at this game in the future and really get into the nitty-gritty of what made it so great, but since I was replaying the game again, I just wanted to give you my quick thoughts about why I thought this game was still relevant today, and why it still holds up as one of the greatest games of this generation. That's all for this video, guys. If you like Assassin's Creed and want to see more, please like and subscribe. I publish brand new content all week long, so there's always something new for you to watch. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.